Hi everybody, welcome to another video in my Intro to HTML series. This video we're going to take a step in a different direction. So far we've covered the basics of HTML. We've covered using the header, article footer, we've covered using paragraphs and headings, we've covered the topic of semantics. Basically we've talked about structuring a web page using HTML. But we haven't talked at all about giving those pages some style or controlling the way that they display in the browser. In a previous video, I talked about the idea of separating the idea of presentation from the idea of semantic structure. We talked about how HTML provides a semantic structure for the page so that browsers and search engines and adaptive technologies like screen readers can properly parse through them and make meaning out of otherwise meaningless content. We've talked about how to properly use articles, properly use paragraphs, and properly use headings. We've seen a web page that's going to look something like this. It's kind of boring. It's black and white. The fonts aren't very interesting. There's no interesting white space. It's just a dull page. This video I want to focus on giving this page some style. So you should have this document that we created in previous videos, the one that has 3 articles, each article having 3 paragraphs and an H2, a header with an H1, and then a footer with some text down at the bottom. If you do not have that, you might want to go back to a previous video and hammer out that markup so that you have it so you can work on it on this video. Alright, so what are we going to do? We're going to style this thing. Let's see how that works. In order to style a web page, we're going to use a new language called CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. There are several ways to make CSS, and we're going to just put our style sheet in the head of the document. There are ways of linking to external style sheets, but I'm not going to talk about that in this class because putting one in the head is just a little bit easier. In future classes, or if you want to do some poking around on your own, linking a style sheet is another way of going about it. It's kind of the preferred way of doing it in the industry, but I'm going to teach it this way because it's simpler to learn as a beginner. What does a style sheet look like? A style sheet looks like this. I'm going to put it below my title and still inside of my head. And we're going to use the style tag. Style tag looks just like this. Style, close style. In the opening style tag, we're going to add something called the type attribute. And it looks like this. See how right after the element style here, I put a space, type, equals, and then double quotes, text / CSS. What that's saying is that what I have here is a style, and it's using the whatever's inside of here, the text should be interpreted as CSS type text. CSS is a language. It's different from HTML. In fact, it doesn't look anything like it, and it has different parts. A style rule might look something like this. P and then curly braces. You can find the curly braces on your keyboard. On a regular Windows keyboard, you would see the square braces, these two. If you hold Shift and press those, you get the curly braces. The curly braces define a block of code. You have to have an opening curly brace and a closing curly brace. And inside of here we have what's called the declaration block. I'm just going to change the color to red. I'm going to set the font size to 150%. I can make as many declarations in this block as I want, like background color, this is going to look horrible, by the way. Color red, background color green, 150% size. I'm going to save it just so you can see it. There we go. Wow, it's almost impossible to read. Please don't put red text against a green background because it makes it very hard to read. But you can see that what I did very quickly is every paragraph in my document went to red text, the text is slightly larger, and the background is green. So let's inspect this. I have this thing called a style rule. A style rule exists in a style sheet. The style sheet is defined by the opening and closing style tags. Anything in between here is considered the style sheet. A style rule is defined this way. It's going to be, you're selecting an element, and then you've got a list of declarations that that element has to behave by. So in this case, I said I'm selecting the paragraph, and then I'm changing the color to red, the font size to 150%, and the background color to green. All right, that's what a style rule is. A style sheet can have as many rules as we want. I could do something like this. Article, background color, sky blue. I could do header, background color, silver. I could do footer, background color, silver. And if I save this, refresh it in the browser, you'll see those styles are applied to those different things. The articles have a sky blue background. The header and footer have a silver background. Okay, so I've made a whole bunch of different style rules. So our vocabulary here. We've got our style sheet. It's defined by the opening and closing style tag. Our style rules are defined by what's called the selector and a declaration block. A declaration block is comprised of these things, which are called declarations. All right? So once again, this thing right here is called my selector. I use a selector to choose an element in the HTML document that I want to I want to change the display. Okay, I want to change its appearance. So here I've selected P. So all paragraph elements in my entire document would get this style applied to it. Okay, so if I look down at my HTML, this paragraph, this paragraph, this paragraph, all those paragraphs, every single one in the document, will see that same change in appearance or the change in display. That's my selector. I can select any element in the HTML language. Declaration block. The declaration block is defined by whatever's in between these two braces. The declaration block, okay, declaration block is just a series of programming statements. And these statements are called declarations. This is a declaration. This is a declaration. This is a declaration. I can have as many declarations in the declaration block as I want. And the more declarations that I add, the more qualities of my paragraph are going to change. The declaration is made up of two parts. So I've got a declaration here. It's made up of two parts. It's made up of what's called a property and a value. The property is the quality of this element that I'm going to change. So in this case, color changes the color, or what you would also call the font color. The value is the rate at which this property changes, or how much or in what way that property changes. In this case, color is going to change to red. For font size for the paragraph, font size is going to change to 150%. For background color for the paragraph, it's going to change to green. Proper syntax for this, in other words, the rules to make this work, are property, followed by a colon, followed by a value, followed by a semicolon. If you miss any of these, your style rule isn't going to work. Furthermore, when you make a style rule, you have to have both of these braces. If you're missing a closing brace or an opening brace, the style rule won't work. If you're missing a closing brace, the style rule below it won't work as well. So you can potentially crater your whole style sheet by missing just one character. I want you to get in the habit of when you make a style rule, you do this. You pick what you want to select, paragraph. Immediately get both opening and closing brace. That way you've got your whole block in there. You don't have to worry about coming in later and putting in the closing brace or forgetting it. All right? So I've got my selector, I've got my opening and closing brace. Next, your property, colon, semicolon. I always put my colon and semicolon in right away because then I know I've got my semicolon there. I'm not going to forget it. Oftentimes, if you do something like this, you might move really fast. You might forget the semicolon. So I always do my colon and semicolon at the same time because shift colon, let go, hit the same button again, and it's a semicolon. Really quick and simple, and it's going to save you a lot of problems. So always get your curly braces in together at the same time, and then get your colon and semicolon in at the same time, and you won't have any problems with missing any of your characters and having broken style sheets. Last thing about the style sheet, you need to make sure that you use the closing style tag with the opening style tag. You might have noticed when I made my style sheet, I did this, just like I do with any tag set. I make my opening tag and my closing tag immediately. Close it. And I'll show you why. So I've got my style tag in here. I don't have any styles applied to my document right now. It's just empty style sheet, right? Because there are no style rules in here. Now watch what happens if I miss the closing style tag. I'm going to save it. I'm going to go to the browser, refresh it. Everything disappears. This is the moment where you start to freak out. Don't freak out. If your page is gone, it just means you probably don't have a closing style tag. This is a very common mistake that new web developers make. Make sure you get that closing style tag. When you have it, your whole document is still there. All right, this is the basics of style sheets. In future videos, I'm going to show you specific properties and values to use. We're going to talk about controlling fonts. We're going to talk about controlling colors. We're going to talk about controlling white space. We're going to talk about controlling the overall display of a page using CSS. You've got your primer. Now we're going to move on to the interesting stuff. Thanks for watching.